My name is Jeannie Barthold, and I am one of the founders of TissueForm. Thank you so much for this opportunity to present our company with you today. Next slide. Volumetric tissue loss is a tremendous problem caused by four main factors. The first is injury. The second is a genetic condition such as hemifacial atrophy. Third, disease-related complications such as lipodystrophy. And fourth, of course, aging. Together, these conditions affect millions of people worldwide. Next slide, please. The largest market for volumetric tissue restoration is in this last group of patients experiencing volume loss due to either aging or for patients suffering from acne scarring. Additionally, and very unfortunately, I think, there's an increasing societal trend where beauty and self-confidence directly affect acceptance and success in the workplace. Psychologists at Rice University found that people with facial disfigurements, including tissue loss from scarring, acne marks, and wounds, were more likely to be rated poorly by their interviewers in a job interview setting, despite anything that they actually said. So to correct for this type of tissue loss in the face, there are materials that exist currently known as dermal fillers that are injected beneath the skin to restore the volume. But there's a significant problem with these fillers. Next slide, please. Most common and popular fillers today are not long lasting and have only about a 4-month lifespan in the body before they easily break down and the patient has to do the treatment again. That is a lot of injections every year. Patients desire longer lasting filler materials because the repeat treatments and recovery are time consuming. Additionally, in the last year, it has made many of us wish to decrease any kind of non-essential medical appointments. So a long-lasting filler would allow patients to have fewer visits and unnecessary exposures. Next slide. That is where TissueForm comes in. We fix this problem with our novel injectable biomaterial. So our material reduces the frequency of treatments and improves customer satisfaction because, unlike the other products that exist, it produces a completely natural repair and it increases longevity. So let me show you how we do this. If you could go to the next slide, please. And I don't know if you'll be able to, but can you try playing the video with the play button? It's not gonna work. Okay, well, Pure Voluma is a material that's injected, filling a defect and restoring the tissue volume. The material contains non-cellular tissue particles packed tightly together and formed to the desired shape after injection. We take advantage of a unique chemistry to allow the material to cross-link into a solid at body temperature after injection. The particles then promote cells from the surrounding tissue to recellularize and deposit new tissue matrix beneath the skin. The tightly woven particles of our material enable Pure Voluma to resist degradation from natural enzymes, which allows it to last much longer than current fillers, which break down super quickly from this natural enzymatic response. Next slide, please. There's increasing demand in the market for new, long-lasting, and novel tissue filler products like Pure Voluma across the United States and the world, focused primarily in urban centers. So there are 2.4 million filler procedures performed each year with constant market growth. The majority of these dermal fillers are made up of a material called hyaluronic acid, which I'll refer to as HA for simplicity for the rest of the presentation, which is still one of the two main components of our Pure Voluma product. But with repeat injections comes increased risk of complications such as infection. So that's something we also aim to reduce with our long-lasting filler. Next slide, please. Back in 2016, globally, we spent $6.5 billion on facial injectable treatments. And by 2025, this will more than double. As I mentioned, the most popular filler material is HA, making up more than half of the injectable material filler market. So TissueForm aims to capture an increasing portion of this HA market as our product contains HA, but utilizes a unique chemistry with tissue particles to improve the efficacy. Next slide, please. Our proprietary process includes taking animal tissues, removing the cell contents, micronizing the tissues, and then adding in an HA resin gel to stabilize the tissue particles and allow for injection. Our injection process for clinicians is identical to existing dermal fillers, requiring no additional training and making adoption of Pure Voluma for clinicians very easy. Next slide, please. Competitive HA-based material filler products such as Juvederm and Restylane on the left here do not have a long lifespan in the body. Alternatively, there are synthetic products such as Belafil shown on the right, which have an improved lifespan, but also actively promote scar tissue formation beneath the skin because they're made of these synthetic materials. So in contrast, Pure Voluma lasts at least 3 times longer than competitor HA products, while also promoting a regenerative cell ingrowth and regeneration. Next slide, please. So to de-risk our technology, we actually injected this material beneath the skin of 60 mice. So overall, the Pure Voluma implants persisted in all implant locations, unlike our primary competitor material HA, which as you can see here persisted in less than 50% of the implant locations at 3 months. Additionally, the images on the right show that we see a natural repair response of Pure Voluma compared to HA, noting that there's cell infiltration between these purple particles and deposition of new tissue matrix. Whereas in the HA case, you note that there's no cellular infiltration and we only see this fibrous scar around the edge. Next slide, please. So to further de-risk Pure Voluma towards commercialization, we have to work with a regulatory firm and identify our regulatory pathway. So we identify our technology as a Class 3 medical device, which does require pre-market approval for the FDA. We therefore need GMP certified manufacturing and GLP preclinical testing that is essential to establish safety prior to human testing in approximately 175 patients. As far as required PMAs go, this is actually a relatively short time frame and small population for clinical studies for medical devices. Next slide, please. We have exclusive options through CU Boulder for the patents protecting Pure Voluma, which represents a beachhead market for actually a platform like the platform technology our patents protect. So our first patent defines the methods and especially the composition of Pure Voluma as a filler material, with a special emphasis on the way that the tissue particles are packed together. And our second patent focuses on the unique chemistry that allows the entire hydrogel with particles to cross-link. So with our IP advisor, we have mapped out a long-term vision for our novel material in a range of other significant medical and research applications as well. Next slide, please. TissueForm has developed a model to go to market using information gained through customer discovery of more than 40 private plastic surgery providers locally, as well as in key markets such as LA, Miami, and New York. We'll follow the industry norms and sell directly to providers at private clinics, who in turn provide care to patients. From the customer discovery, we actually understand that virtually all the providers we talk to cite patient satisfaction as the primary driver to their clinic success. So the great thing about this is that they see 2 added benefits to Pure Voluma. The first is that satisfied patients typically elect to receive additional other procedures from the exact same clinician rather than going elsewhere. And second, busy clinics with schedules that are full for a month or more in advance are now able to accommodate more patients with greater upsell potential. Next slide, please. While the FDA pathway makes a longer run out to enter the market, even with very conservative projections, TissueForm could create $16 million in revenue by year 3. And with an 88% gross profit projection, that will only actually increase with manufacturing scale. Once Pure Voluma enters the market in approximately 2 years, TissueForm aims to sell 250 units the first month, which is only about 0.02% of the entire HA market, and increase this till month 12. If you look at the first the first 3 years, TissueForm aims to increase the number of clinics we provide to, and thus increase the percent of the market captured, targeting only 0.16% by the end of year 3. Next slide, please. Development is led by myself, who finished my doctorate in December, and I'm now working full-time for TissueForm, and Corey New, who is a CU Boulder professor of biomedical engineering. Next slide, please. We benefit from a talented team of advisors and consultants who have a lot of expertise that we certainly do not, that currently help guide us. including a plastic surgeon, previous med tech executives, a Techstars C-suite executive, regulatory and patent lawyers, and a product development lead at Cook Medical. Next slide, please. At the close of 2020, we had completed proof of concept testing, finalized our material, created an MVP, and performed the animal study using all non-dilutive grant funding. We're now seeking $1 million over the next 6 months in non-dilutive or small investment that will allow us to complete those GLP preclinical testing that was outlined by our FDA engagement. Specifically with the money from the Montfort Challenge, TissueForm would work with several consultants who we've already met with extensively and actually developed quotes for the work pending this funding.
Okay, I'm so sorry. We're out of time, but we're going to move on to our. Okay, we're going to move on to our Q&A portion now.
Okay.
But great job. Are there any judges who would like to? Oh, yep, Amanda Peterson. Go ahead.
Thanks. Great presentation. Very fascinating science, and congratulations on your recent doctoral graduation. My question is, how much longer does it last? I know longevity is one of your key selling points in addition to the regenerative nature of it. How much longer than perhaps say a Rejuvaderm would a product like this last?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Thanks for asking. So we know that it lasts at least 3 times longer. The reason I didn't say specifically how long is that every human is different, right? And so it breaks down at different times. And the only animal testing that we've actually done is mice. So it's certainly different. It's a really good model and first in vivo study, but that is definitely something that we will figure out throughout. In our mouse studies, we saw that it lasted, some of them lasted 3 times longer, some lasted much longer than that. So yeah.
Thank you.
I see a question from Jerry.
Yes, Jeannie, nice presentation.
Thank you.
Obviously a tremendous amount of potential, especially for a new product like this, where you already have a lot of products on the market. I guess my question is, obviously a couple of things. One, obviously it seems to me your biggest road ahead is going to be with the FDA approval. How long do you see that happening before that happening?
Yeah, that's a great question. The longest road is definitely the FDA. The answer is very much depending on funding. So if we could raise all the funding that we want in the next 6 months, we could get the preclinical studies done definitely within 6 to 12 months of actually having all of that funding, because we have everything set up and kind of pedal ready to go. And we've talked with all of the people that we need to actually manufacture. So that's the first thing. And the second step is the clinical trial. And that involves recruiting different clinics to be involved in the clinical trial and recruiting patients. So that definitely can be time consuming. And to try to mitigate that, we plan to, throughout that 6 to 12 month period of doing the preclinical animal studies, reaching out to all of the different providers who have expressed interest in trying to set up providers for the clinical trial.
Well, that's basically your marketing and sales team, isn't it? The clinical providers.
Yes, it is. It's very connected. I would say that we will need to hire somebody who is really specialized in doing clinical trials, but then also along this for sure doing marketing and sales.
Don, I see your hand was next up. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jeannie. Thanks for that great presentation. Tremendous stuff. So once you get past clinical trials, and I'm assuming you guys are brilliant enough to get through all that stuff, and it's laborious and whatnot, but actually selling and marketing this thing, you show a pretty quick uptake of selling it, and besides everybody of course realizing that it's a better mousetrap, it will take some marketing. Is there partnerships or existing sales channels that you market through, or what are your thoughts from that perspective?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me that question, because that's the one slide we didn't get to. There's twofold answers to that question. The first is that clearly the competitors that we have in this space are very, very large competitors, right? They're people that are really well known, Allergan, Galderma, they're very big names. And our customer discovery definitely told us that physicians at these clinics do prefer and trust those companies more than they would a newcomer, which makes total sense. And so those companies, those large companies, the way in which they expand their new product line is often through acquisitions or licensing. So that's definitely something that we will look for. I think that's the best way for this product to get to market. But outside of that, we actually have begun talking to different smaller manufacturers who actually manufacture that HA product that I talked to already, and trying to develop more of a partnership early on to achieve some of that funding and some of that FDA expertise to ensure the success of this getting to market, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Jean.
Thank you, Don. Phil, go ahead.
Hi, yes, that was certainly a great presentation. One thing was related to that pathway to market. How do the cost points, the investment, how does that kind of look like as far as translating into a final set of pricing for the product, as well as, you know, margins on that product? Is that something that you see that is going to be something that sets you apart from the competition?
Yeah, so I think what you're asking is basically like the margins that we have through that whole process that I talked about, like 88% right now, and that it will increase. How does that compare to other products currently?
Yes, yeah, I mean, exactly. How much given this heavy R&D basis and the pricing that's out there in terms of the existing products that are on the market, could you just fill in that area a little?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so the pricing that we put up on that slide was very much based on customer and discovery and what the physicians felt that customers would pay for something that was longer lasting, like what kind of the limits were. But that's certainly an area that we need to vet further to ensure that that pricing makes sense before we get to that point. In terms of the heavy R&D and trying to figure out estimates for our pro forma and different projections, it's part of the reason we have that advisor from Cook Biotech, Tyler Novak, because he worked in our lab actually previously about 6 years ago. So we have a fairly good connection with him, and his entire position is to basically do that with products that Cook puts out. And so he's been really helpful in trying to figure out exactly what kind of percentage markup you need to make it worth it, because the manufacturing is such a large percentage of that. And so when we've done our calculations, he actually says that something you have to assume for is that $2 a minute for any kind of manufacturing is what you sort of have to assume for facilities and people, which is pretty expensive. And so that is in our calculation of how long does it actually take to manufacture this item, and trying to factor in the facilities and all of that, as well as the raw materials. So the raw materials themselves are actually quite cheap. It's the heavy R&D that is involved. The one thing that I didn't answer from what you asked is how the FDA pathway is reflected in those estimates. And so the FDA pathway and all of that hurdle is not reflected in those estimates. So it definitely takes a little while of a product being on the market to make up for that swing, which is why a market that is this profitable is promising for something that requires that much of a pathway, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, you're welcome.